Welcome everyone to today's presentation in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. We are thrilled today to have a special presentation with one of our esteemed alumni. And before I introduce her, I do want to start by telling you a little bit about today's series and how you can participate. My name is Andrea DeHaan. I am the Outreach Coordinator for CHAS, and I'm pleased to be here today with support from the college for this special presentation. If you are listening and want to participate in today's conversation, and we hope that you will, you've got two ways to do that. The first is to use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. That's available to you now and will be available throughout the presentation, and we'll be taking questions from our presenter after her presentation. So please don't hesitate if while our guest today is talking, you think of something, please go ahead and type your question in the Q&A feature for us. You can also use the chat feature. That's a good way to get in touch with me, for example, if you notice any technical issues or something we may have missed, or if you just want to give a shout out and say hello and let us know you're here, feel free to wave or say hi in the chat feature. So I'm also going to be joined throughout the hour with Patrick Mason, the Leonard J. Arrington Chair of Mormon History and Culture at USU. He is going to be leading the Q&A at the end, so I will let Patrick reintroduce himself at that time. But what I'd like to do now is introduce our guest today. Our guest today is the eldest of seven. Reverend Dr. Fatimah Salleh was born in Brooklyn, New York, to a Puerto Rican and Malaysian mother and an African-American father. Dr. Salleh received her PhD in mass communication from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She also earned a master's degree from Syracuse University in public communication and a second master's in divinity from Duke University. Dr. Salleh is currently the founder of A Certain Work, an organization dedicated to educating on issues of faith, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she is co-author of The Book of Mormon for the Least of These. She is married to Eric Sorensen, also a CHAS alumnus, and they have 4 children. Dr. Fatimah Salleh, we welcome you and are excited to hear you tell us about your experiences today and where you have gone with your degree since leaving CHAS. So I'm going to turn the time over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much. And I want to just thank Dr. Mason, who's here, who's also going to be helping with facilitation, for Dean Joe Ward and the whole College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences for actually thinking I was worth this invitation and could be here today and to be able to talk a little bit more about my experience and my narrative and my story around my degree. As part of my bio was read, and to talk about that, I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, and my father is African-American, my mother is Puerto Rican and Malaysian. And you think, why start there? Because that's the best place to start, is how I was raised and by whom and where. And it is definitely a part of how I see the world, and the lens at which I approach the world is through a brown Black woman's body and experience in America. And so, and as I move through this, I have to say that I will ever mention, even when I preach from the pulpit, I'll always try to name where I'm from, my social location, because it impacts even how I see the divine, how I move in the world, my lens, how I wrestle in certain ways with things that are going on in the world. My father never graduated from high school. My father went to prison and was in there a year and a half on a crime he didn't commit, but it would just completely change the trajectory of my father's life. Being a felon and serving a year and a half at Rikers Island would, as a 19-year-old, would change him in ways that my dad will still be fighting to this day as a homeless human in New York City. And that in and of itself, I grew up with a strong sense from him of what it was to be Black and be proud to be a Black American, and that nothing in the world could really, don't let the narrative of the world shift how I saw myself. And so I have to be so grateful for him, although not, in some ways my dad was abusive and couldn't really navigate well in wellness and marriage with my mother and raising children. I do take away the beautiful things he did teach me about being in this body in America. My mother, a Malaysian Puerto Rican, a daughter of an immigrant who changed his name to come here and would never make it back to his homeland. My mother had 5 of us. She's a first generation college student, had 5 of us by the time she finished her medical residency. She'd be the mother of 7. There's 7 of us. I have my brothers and sisters whom I love very much. And my mother, being the daring human that she is, because if you can imagine a Malaysian Puerto Rican woman who would actually go to school and get her MD while having 7 children and being a doctor. When she separated and divorced my father, she would be a single parent. And she moved to Texas and then to Utah when I was 15. I'm the oldest of the 7. And when we moved to Utah, one of the first things we said to my mother was, there are no Black people in Utah. And my mom's like, there's some. Then she looked at the population, and at that time it was 0.5%, but not even a whole 1%, not even 1 out of 100. So if you can imagine moving from New York City to Texas, right by the border, where we had a large influx of beautiful Mexican and Mexican Americans that we were growing up with, to Utah, Fruit Heights, Utah. I'm a Davis High student, Davis Dart, if that's still the mascot. Anyway, and the 2 years I was at Davis High School were great years. It also solidified in me, out of 2,000 students, 3 of us were Black. And me and my sister and I were 2 of the 3. Something happened in that time. The student body would elect me to be their homecoming queen. And at the same time they chose me to be their homecoming queen, the principal called me in and said, we're getting hateful messages from parents who don't want you to be the homecoming queen, and use quite vivid language about it. So when I went through that, I said, nope, I'm still gonna do the homecoming queen. I'm still gonna go through the town in a convertible and wave on Main Street. And do you know that my mother, she ran beside that car the whole parade to make sure I was safe. That would be the juxtaposition of my life in Utah. The sense of where people would accept me and see me and hold me well amidst the same climate of deep hatred and unacceptance and bias and prejudice. And I would have to hold both of those at the same moment. And I really want to say that that same moment you would have people like my mother who would run beside me to make sure I was safe and doing the things that I wanted to do. When Utah State offered me a presidential leadership scholarship, it was the last school I wanted to go to. I really wanted to leave Utah, but my mom's like, nope, they offered you a 4-year ride, that's where you're going. And I'm like, okay. And I thought, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And I started Utah State not wanting to be there. I think I was tired of being one of so few. But let me say this about Utah State. I loved Utah State. I met some of the friends I have now who are some of the most rebellious, radical people on the face of the planet, and they're still my friends some 20 years later. I met them in classes such as Black history, the history of civil rights, women's history. I met friends I would have for a lifetime. Not only that, I got introduced to Ross Peterson, who did, at that time was teaching. And he even sent me an email this morning telling me, wishing me luck as I did this. I want to say when I majored in history, I majored in it because I loved the professors. I decided to major in something where I liked showing up to class. I know, and people are like, what are you gonna do? Which is the question they always ask. They never ask my sister, who, you know, she's pre-med. Someone's be like, what are you gonna do? They never ask that question. But if you major in history, people are like, what are you gonna do with your life? Like at 19, 20, 21, I know what I'm doing with my life. But I literally just picked a major because I felt enlivened. I felt when I was learning, I was touching on something. And I always say this, history taught me to think critically about the human story. History taught me how to think critically about the human story. My communications degree at Syracuse taught me how to ask the questions to hear the human story, and it taught me how to write it. My divinity degree, it taught me it was okay to wrestle with God. And it was okay to ask God and call God on the carpet about injustice and pain in the human story. So all my degrees, that history degree, my communications degree, my divinity degree, people ask me all the time, even when I was in divinity school, what are you doing? I'm like, I have no idea. I am following my heart. When I finished history, let me just say this, I had folks like Norm Jones, because when I finished history, I was like, I got to go to grad school, I got to do something. And I didn't get accepted to any of the schools. I applied for a PhD program. And if I got accepted, there was no money. And so it was a huge amount of debt. So I remember talking to Dr. Norm Jones, who was the head of the history department then, and saying, what do I do with my life? Which happens over and over. I don't even think that no matter your major, there's going to be times in your life where you go, what do I do with what I've learned and where I'm going? And I want to tell you that is okay. That is part of becoming you and your full authentic self, is the journey of the not unknown, the journey of finding out who you are and what will enliven you and what is calling you. And I remember I took a year off. I had served a mission, took a year off, and Syracuse University says, hey, we'd like to think about you to do a communications degree in newspaper writing. And I'm like, what in the world? That makes no sense. I'm a history major. And as Ted Pease, who is now no longer teaching at the university, said to me, he goes, like journalists, are good things, but historians are just people who miss the deadline. And I remember thinking, and I absolutely loved my degree at Syracuse. I got my PhD at UNC in communication. And during that time, I want to say this, every single moment of my degrees, I took years off in between. I took years off to work, to find myself, to do volunteer work. I worked at a battered women's shelter, a safe house. I worked teaching Portuguese teaching English to folks who knew Portuguese. And when school called me back is when I got frustrated with my life. I was like, there's got to be more. I've got to still, and I kept searching. Now I thought forever I would be a professor. I really did. And so when I got my PhD, I'm like, this is it. I'm a professor now, no more school. And heaven knows I had a six-digit student debt. So I'm like, I just got to go to work. And I remember I applied to all these jobs after I got my doctorate, and none of them worked out. Everywhere I went, there was a no, a no, a no. I didn't even get to interviews. I remember saying a prayer and offering up, like, put me in the right place to do the work of my heart, and everything closed. And I remember being so frustrated that I got my husband, who I met at Utah State. Here's a picture of him and I when he graduated. He's a Hiram boy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about him because he's not here to really help to say anything. So I remember coming to him and saying, no one's hiring a Black, brown woman teaching communication. And what did I do all this school for? I remember taking my PhD, which was on the wall. My dissertation chair had bought me a beautiful frame, and we hung it as soon as I defended. And I want to say I'd had my fourth child, 2 of them in my PhD program. I often tell the story of nursing my baby, do my defense, because she was only 2 months old, and then she pooped everywhere. And I had to literally wash fecal matter off of myself as I'm defending this dissertation for a doctorate. And I remember thinking, this is so life. This is life. This is doing your amazing hard moments and still having poop happen. And dealing with what it is to live this real existence, real life of just grappling with big moments and still poop is happening. And so what happened was with my diploma that was hanging, when I couldn't get a job, and even my professors at the university, they said, we don't know why you're not getting hired. You're one of our only graduates that's not getting hired. Everyone else was. Now, most of my colleagues are all white. And I thought, could this be partly racial? Could this, I don't know. Then one of my friends, I started wrestling with the church a little bit. And one of my friends like, go to Div school, go to Duke. And I went, what? No. You don't ask me to go to more school after I've just done school. And because I was so frustrated, all the doors had closed. I applied to Duke Divinity School, and within 2 weeks, they accepted me. And it was one of the acceptances of my life where I cried my eyes out. I said, there's no way that any God in heaven wants me for 3 more years in school. Unfortunately, and fortunately, that was the case. I often said I went to Div school so I could learn to name God for myself. And shortly after I got finished with Duke Divinity School, Duke Divinity hired me. And I started new programs to help people of color, especially brown and Black students, and students who were coming in. I started a whole new program. I loved it. But within 6 months of starting the new program, I'd been with them for 1.5 years, pastoring students and then starting a new academic program as an administrator, I began to feel suffocated. I tried to tell Duke, I'm like, there's racism running through here. There's some ways in which we move that are I just couldn't handle it. And I remember telling my husband, it's hard for me to work here. I feel like I can't breathe and live into who I am. I feel like there's more. And I said, and my husband, once again, Eric, said, quit. Do something on your own. And so I quit. And I remember saying, I'm turning down $58,000 a year, coverage of insurance, everything, for what? And I said, I had 4 kids. This is so reckless and irresponsible. Just because I couldn't breathe as a Black woman in an environment, women have been doing this forever. BIPOC women have always been places that have struggled. I don't know. And then I had a nerve to tell my husband, he goes, what's your business plan? What business are you going to start? I'm like, I'm going to go into white churches and teach them how to dismantle the racism in their theology. That probably isn't the best business plan ever. But I started with let's take racism, let's tackle racism in religion, and Christianity. And I started this program and I started teaching small churches. I remember 2 pastors came up to me, one Black pastor, one white pastor, who were working together, and they're like, hey, do you coach pastors? I said, no, I don't. I teach about things. They're like, think about it. Think about helping pastors pastor. And so I thought about it and I started working with them. Fast forward 2 years, and a large part of my work is that I pastor pastors of all denominations. I also teach about racism in Christianity, and I teach about racism in the secular world. I want to say this, Utah State prepared me. Professors in the history department would allow me to guest lecture every once in a while. Can you believe that? An undergrad would allow me to speak into what it was and my experience. I was also allowed to do, thank you. They would have the Martin Luther King Candlelight Vigil, and I would speak at that. Utah State was a place where I started naming my experience. It was the place where I started carving out the words to injustice and to racism. It would serve me the rest of my life. History is what I take with me over and over again. Like, I developed a whole program called Spit and Mud, the messy miracle of sight, of seeing Christian racism. And I literally start the whole thing with a history lesson of how Christianity and racism have been together for a long time. And I started with history. I read history books now for fun, not so much, but just because it like is a beautiful way for me to ground myself. And I cannot thank enough the professors who saw me. I want to say that very deeply. I majored in history because I loved the topic and because the professors saw me. In a world where I was either unseen or seen in a particular way that was binding and suffocating. So Utah State holds a very special place for me. It emboldened me to study the things that rang true to me. And not only that, they told me I could do it. And I'm like, hey, I want to think about history. I want to think about this. I want to think about this. They're like, do all that thinking. Do all that writing. Push the envelope. I want to say that humanities, art, social science is rooted in the human experience, the human story, and why our stories matter. You study one of these in one of these majors, it is part and parcel of the human story. And more than that, I do justice work not because it's just something that came to me. It's been developed in me for a long time, in college and undergrad sealed it for me. But I wanted to leave you with 3 things that have kind of helped me through the world, to help me I didn't even get started in my chosen profession, which is like, I teach and pastor pastors, and until I was 43 years old. I was getting my second master's in divinity at 38. And I remember walking along the beach for a little bit, and I was arguing with God, like, I should be farther along in my life. Why do I feel so far behind? Like, why am I not farther along? Why don't I have this X or Y or Z? And it was such a wrestle for me to even think that I started my business at 43. Like, what am I doing? Like, why haven't I settled into a profession? Why am I not just? But I want to say that some of the greatest parts of having your life twist and turn and take these ragged sort of edges and moves and pivots is that you are finding yourself. I can never imagine for myself that I'd be living this life. I didn't have the imagination for it. I couldn't see at 21 how my history degree would lead me to be the owner of my own business, trying to dismantle racism in nonprofit organizations, in churches, and in secular world. Like, who would name that? And all I could see for myself was the dream of being a professor. And my life didn't work out that way in those sort of ways. And the part of me living into who I am is also getting to mourn some of the dreams I had for myself that were never really meant for me. Let me say that again. I had to mourn some of the dreams I had for myself that were never meant for me. That there's a part of us living into this wild journey of ours that is unexpected and that we don't yet know what's ahead for us. I want to ask you and to think about, as you make a wild journey that is this life, to get you some good love circles. Get people who will love you well. Let you change and move and navigate. They'll let you cry and get back up, and they'll mourn with you and get angry for you. I have to say, I married a white man from Harlem, and I don't know, one of the best things about him being in my love circle is that he'll get angrier for me than I can get for myself sometimes. And sometimes when he gets angry on my behalf, it allows me to take a deep breath Because sometimes shared rage allows you to start to forgive. Get you people who love you well. And let me say this, my love circle is not filled with Christians. I have some. I have Mormons and Methodists, but do you know some of the greatest people in my love circles are people who don't share hardly any of my beliefs. They're atheists and agnostics and believe in sanctity. Like all these little beautiful things, I have them in my love circle, and they couldn't bless me. I have trans and beautiful LGBTQ people and who are just amazing. So I also want to say this. Your love circle can be people who don't need to believe like you and see the world in the same way. And if you let them blow your mind, they will, and they can still love you deeply. One thing they do have is a deep regard for humanity. I do want to say, I would like to encourage you, because something about this College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences, ask the good, hard questions of humanity. Ask humanity to be better and do better. There's the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylors, and there's the Elijah McCain's, and there's forced hysterectomies at the border, and there's senses of which there's deep injustice in this world. And you ask yourself, outside of your bubbles and your white world, what is it that I can think and move differently? And because it's such a hard thing to relate and move in other spheres, I'm going to ask you and beckon you to learn the stories of other people. That just because your world is okay here doesn't mean it's okay for everybody else. And something about this degree will hopefully make you see, or hopefully offer you an invitation to hear other folk. And to be able to sit in the stories of other people and to hear injustice and think and ask the good questions. What do I do to dismantle this? Read the books that challenge you. Get to know and love people that just won't accept the way you think, but ask you to think deeper and harder and wider and longer, who call you to that. Try not to get so hurt over things. Do you know how many times I'm corrected? Folk always correct me, like, Fatimah, don't be saying that. That's not right. Fatimah, don't. You know, one of the things I love about my husband, he goes, I've been married to you so long that I realize that I have to check my white supremacy all the time. Like, we're just always like playing whack-a-mole with his, like, if he says something, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of toxic male masculinity coming through right there. You may want to work on that. If you're going to engage in the work, be humble and stay in it. You're needed. I'm going to also ask you that this work of justice and social justice is a work of millimeters. It's the nudging of the world. It's to say, I have a part in this and I want something different for generations to come. I want it to be just a little bit better. If I can do anything in my community, in my churches, in my world, to nudge it towards justice, towards goodness. I'm going to tell you this, and I don't know if someone would have told me if I would have believed him. Doing the work of social justice is a lonely work sometimes. And if you're an empath, if you're feeling, and most of the time, if you're in these majors, you get to know humanity well, and it can be quite painful. Do it anyway. Ask the hard questions. Study and live and breathe into the stories of other folk, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable and the oppressed. They call to us to do the work. That is why my degrees mean everything to me. I don't know if you would have told me later, hey, Fatimah, what are you going to do with a history degree and a communications and a divinity degree? I don't know. Maybe I'll start a business. Maybe I'll start a business teaching people about racism, working with pastors, and working with churches to live out a better life as disciples. And as I do this, I want to say this. I cannot even, this history degree of mine, I've just come back from the beach for a couple of days, the North Carolina beach, which is the Atlantic Ocean. And I literally stood in the Atlantic Ocean while my kids were running back and forth. And this is what history does. I knew that same beach, that same water was the same site of the Middle Passage. It was the same site where so many African bodies had tossed themselves into the ocean to avoid slavery, and when many landed here to the horrors of America. There's something about when you know, and I realized at that beach 2 days ago, that I asked that place and that site where I knew so much horror had happened, that it could also be a place of redemption, where justice can happen, where my children will live in a world where they won't be hunted. This is our work. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Ask the questions, ask the questions. I'm here. I might not have the right answers, but I could certainly try. I also want to tell you, if you're thinking, and these majors, people will say a lot of things about these majors, but if it calls to you, if you find that you find a bit of yourself in your call in the world, do it. You'll be surprised at how brave and wild your life will be. Thank you.
Fatimah, that was incredible. And I love the way you joined your experience with a history degree to how it has empowered you to be more brave in the world and to ask those difficult questions. And, you know, I was just sitting here taking furiously notes and writing down things you said, just because there were so many wonderful highlights in your talk just now. So thank you so much. And I do want to, I know that we have an engaged audience, one of our largest audiences ever on a virtual event. I'm so pleased to have them here today, and some of your former professors who are here with us today. So to give them time, I want to turn things over to Dr. Patrick Mason, who is going to lead us through some of those questions and lead us through the rest of the discussion. So Patrick, I turn things over to you.
Thanks, Andrea. Let me just start by saying, Reverend Dr. Salleh, amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you for the word today. I'm looking up here in my office here on campus. I have a poster of Malcolm X, one of his quotes from the speech, The Ballad or the Bullet. And he says, of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. And I keep it up there, not because, you know, I mean, I know there's lots of other good things to study, right? I mean, people cure cancer and they build airplanes and they do lots of other things that make our lives better. But just what you said, and I think you said it as well as I've ever heard it, Fatimah, in terms of why studying these things matter, because deeply that they help us understand what it means to be human in all of that complexity, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So we have a lot of great questions. So let me dive in and ask some of these questions from the audience. And so one is, I don't know, maybe because of your husband's family, maybe you get back here to Cache Valley semi-regularly, but you've probably noticed that Cache Valley hasn't changed all that much since you were since you were here. It's still a predominantly white population here. So one question here is, can you advise us, white people, how to best support our Black and brown fellow human beings? Sometimes I feel like because this isn't my story to tell, I need to be quiet about BLM issues, Black Lives Matter. But what do Black people really want / need from white people right now? I want to listen and support in the ways that actually matter. And I think, you know, talking to a lot of friends and colleagues and family members and others, I think this is a common refrain. There's a kind of moral support and a moral conviction that I think more people have felt in the past few months than in a long time, but sometimes aren't quite sure what to do because they don't want to say or do the wrong thing because it's not their story.
Well, that's a powerful question. And I say that question is actually so multifaceted, right? I go back to John Lewis's story, the late wonderful civil rights and congressman who just passed, who urged us to get into some good trouble. And if anyone got into good trouble most of his life, it was him. So much in good trouble. I do want to say that there's a sense in which I've decided it's like a rhythm, that he talks about the time when they were sort of going through on the freedom rides, and this white man who was previously a naval officer, I should have his name right on the tip of my tongue, but I don't know, I don't have it right. That what happened was that when he was getting beat down, this his fellow rider on the freedom rides stepped in front and took a beating for him. And he said it took several blows before he fell to his knees to stand in front of, he goes, me, a 20-something-year-old Black man, this older white man stood in front to take the blows for me. So I had enough time to run and get away. Sometimes I say allyship or work into that. Some would say move from allyship to co-conspirator, is about knowing when to step in front and get hit, take the blows, and knowing when to step aside and let Black and brown folks do their work. So I say that it requires a sense of discernment. It requires a sense, and I know something about our culture demands that we don't make mistakes, or that I'm afraid of messing up. But that fear of messing up really binds us sometimes. I think you're going to mess up. Let me say that right now. All right, we're going to mess up. In the work of justice, we are going to mess it up, and probably royally. But that does not mean you cannot self-correct. That does not mean you cannot learn to do it better. First off, when I served a mission in learning Portuguese, it's like you're going to make a million mistakes. What are you going to do? Just not talk? You're going to have to speak the language, make a million mistakes, and then as they're correcting you, and Brazilians corrected me all the time. In fact, 2 3-year-olds would correct me. They're like, nah. And I had to be corrected also. It's so much that it became instinct. That when they corrected the way I said something or the way I conjugated something, I could do it almost immediately. Now, when I was first doing it, to be corrected, I'd be like, it would debilitate me. Soon you get used to it and you're like, boom, boom, and you can rotate and rebound in really beautiful ways. I am saying that the work of anti-racism requires us to be, in a way, humble enough, but brave enough to realize we're going to mess up, and we're going to have to move in ways that both listen and act. And how do we do that, and how do we measure that? So I'm going to say, know when to stand in front, know when to step aside, and get ready to make a million mistakes, but do not let that hinder you from doing this work. We are all making mistakes. Do you think with my LGBTQIA plus friends and family that I love, that I don't mess it up almost every single time? I'm like, no, and that's not my pronoun, Fatimah. And I'm like, oh, but I also realize that correction is coming to help me and move me in ways. And so I almost want to get my husband here, but he don't want to be nowhere on no Zoom. I want to get him here because he's probably one of the really good examples in my life of someone who he's surrounded by people of color and loves them deeply, and we've been married, we've been together 21 years. I'll still say to him, what? He's like, oh, all right. And he'll think about it and come back and be like, all right, I correct. That was wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, if you're going to get involved in this work, take your steps, feel out, talk to folk, but also be able to discern when to step in front, when to step aside, and keep going. You're going to make mistakes, but keep going. Just self-correct and keep going.
That's great. Thank you. As you went through all these different degrees, all these different schools, how many Black or brown professors did you have? Did you find a difference in how they taught and what you learned from them, from your white professors? Do you wish you would have had more Black or brown professors? Would that have made a difference for you in your education?
Woo-wee. So I don't think I had a single one at Utah State. That being said, I had beautiful professors who I love deeply and who are my mentors and who have written me a million letters of recommendation over the years as I went to all these schools. That being said, I didn't have my first Black professor until my doctoral program at UNC Chapel Hill. And I had him, and then I had a woman, Dr. Crystal Feemster. I had Harry Amana and Dr. Crystal Feemster, who's at Yale, and she does Black women and Black women around lynching and all that. Oh, she's fabulous. But anyway, I had Harry Amana, and I remember seeing him and just being so in awe that a Black person was teaching me. I'm like, oh my gosh, we exist in the academy. And his perspective was so beautiful and like just kind of radical. And his relationship with Black students in the class was very culturally Black. So if we said something and he's like, what are you trying to say? You know, and there was this banter. So it was culturally even nice to see in the ivory tower and the academy, this sense of community that I didn't know I was missing until it showed up in the classroom. And I'm like, oh, folks who know Black culture and have lived it and breathe it and like can move. So I think it changes to see your own, to see people who share your same racial identity in places where we don't see ourselves, so that you can even imagine that we're there and we're teaching. And I remember I had a Black woman professor in div school, and she's the first person I said at the end of the first class, she's like, and by the way, she ended her lecture like this: God's a Black woman. And she walked out, and I'm like, I remember looking at my colleague like, what did she just say? But one of the first things, Dr. Ebony Marshall Turman, oh my gosh, she's fabulous. But anyway, she said, the mere fact that I walk into this classroom and as a Black woman, maybe the first time y'all have ever seen in power as someone who teach, who doesn't look like you. And she goes, and that'll already start you thinking in different ways and navigating who can teach you and who you can learn from. So it will seem strange to many of you to learn from the body like this. And when she said that, I realized that it was a powerful point. Like, it matters even to white students to learn from Black, brown bodies, BIPOC folk, because it teaches you that you too can learn and be a part of community and have them be your professor. It changes and moves for all of us. So yes, I have to say I had wonderful, wonderful white professors, no but. That's a period, full statement. And I had amazing Black professors, 3 or 4 by the time I hit div school. And div school, you know what I did? Because I already had a PhD. I only took classes from Black folks. When I had my electives, I'm like, give me everybody Black. And literally did my degree like that. I'm like, Black professor, I'm there. And people like, Fatimah, you have lost. I'm like, listen, this degree is just an add-on. I'm going to take everybody Black and see what I can learn. And it literally just shifted and changed even how I see God and theology. It's one of the best decisions I ever made. So yes, it matters. It matters.
Let me ask about we have 2 questions that don't seem related, but they're both about the kind of emotional aspect of some of this and some of the feelings, the affect as you've gone through all of this. So one question is, can you talk more about this feeling of suffocation? You said you felt suffocated here, especially when you were in Utah. Davis County, Utah State. So can you talk more about that? What is behind that feeling? What does it feel like? How do you deal with that? And then on the other side of it, you talked about feeling the call, feeling called to do the work that you do. So what does that feel like? How do you know when the call comes?
Ooh. Call is interesting. Okay, let me answer the first, suffocation. I'm going to do this in a way that how I teach it. My good friend, my freshman year of Utah State was Jenny Price. And she recently passed away of colon cancer. We'd been in the MTC together, at each other's weddings. And she recently passed away at 43 of colon cancer. And at her last days, they said she's actively dying, meaning that regular things that she normally did took all the energy from her. And so even to talk on the phone took everything out of her. So things that she would normally do just took everything energy. And they said, this is the active dying stage. I want to say suffocation in some ways feels like active dying stages of a season. It feels like the things you normally do and could do, they're taking all your energy out of you. You wake up in the morning, you're like, why am I tired to even go to work? Why am I tired to, like, what I normally could do and would have been enjoyed or happy or didn't think about, all of a sudden becomes very cumbersome and heavy. And that's probably my best description of that, is as if what you're doing, you no longer have the energy to do. You're like, this doesn't bring me joy. It's not life-giving to me. It feels like this season of what I'm doing is like, it's hard for me to breathe. And I remember talking to my therapist, because, hello, normalized therapy, that she said, how long has it been since you've taken a deep breath? You seem to shallow breathe a lot. And I remember thinking, I don't deep breathe very often at work. And every so often now, as a gut check, I take deep breaths when I'm in the middle of my work. And if I could take a deep breath easily, I'm like, okay, I'm still in life-giving work that still gives me breath and is not stealing it from me. That's one. Two, call. Call is an eruption. It's not something that just happens. It like happens over time. It's like sometimes it's just not one thing, but it's like constantly evolving and moving with you. There's two ways theologically to see this. One is that what people affirm in you, like beautiful things people put in you, like, hey, you're really good at this. Hey, you're talented at this. Hey, you really, when you make, and you don't want to believe them. But I'm going to ask you, the sincere people who are actually putting beautiful things into your life, take a chance and believe them. Because sometimes call comes from people who love us and know us. And sometimes they come from people who don't even like, hey, I noticed this about you. And it'd be like, hey, I got to pastors because pastors noticed it about me. Can you imagine? I came into a profession because people asked me to do something that I didn't know I could do. Then, not is it just the outside affirmation, but sometimes it's inside of you. Something that erupts that feels like life-giving for you, that feels you get joy doing it. And I remember, who is it that said, I think it is Frederick Buechner said, your call is like where your deepest like passions meet the world's deepest needs. And so it's that like union of like you being like feeling like I want to do this kind of work and the world needs you to do that kind of work. So I do 2 or 3 things like that. And I also say, if you're 20 something, you're like, well, it feels like this right now, go for it. And if it shifts and changes, do not be afraid of your life shifting, okay? Do not believe that you only have one chapter. Switch it up, you can. It's not the sense if you're locked into this, you always got to do that. If it no longer is life-giving, trust in the universe, in the world, that you can pivot yourself and see and search out what would give you life now. Just because you were called to it at 20, don't mean you called to it at 30. Now, I'm going to say this for me. I believe in the God of my now. Like even what I was and what gave me rest at 30, don't give me rest at 45. My world is completely different. So I'm saying to you, allow yourself to hear yourself and be okay with the shifting. Be okay if it turns and flips.
And how do you sustain it? Another question is, somebody talking about that she's a full-time, that she's a single mother trying to find her way through school, trying to do everything. You cleaned poop off yourself while you were defending your dissertation. I mean, even when you felt the call, even when you feel it, I mean, how do you sustain yourself through the lonely work, through the hard times, through the isolation? Because just because you feel the call, I assume it doesn't mean it's all joy, it's all roses, right? So how do you sustain yourself?
So let me start with Nana. I also think that sometime in my life, I'm going to write a book called Nana Theology. But my Nana, she's now 96, Black grandma, my dad's mom. She's very close to me. I'm very close to her. But she told me once, I said, Grandma, I'm living what I'm supposed to. I'm doing what God wants me to do. And my life is not, it is still hard. This is horrible. This is the worst job I've ever had, is following a God that doesn't make things easier. And she just was real quiet. She's like, I don't understand. Where did you get in the Bible or anywhere that your life was going to be easier because you were living out what God asked you to do? Knowing, well, it doesn't matter. I have this thing in my head that if I live right, that things should be easier and everything should be nice. And she's like, there's no real support of that anywhere. You know, so I want to say that. I want to start with Nana theology right there. But sustaining yourself, that's a very serious question. Let me tell you this. I take rest very seriously. I take therapy and finding avenues of healing seriously. I have several different modalities of like healing that I go to. Like I do my yoga. Like my son, before all this, I was really nervous to speak to y'all today. And he's like, take some deep breaths and meditate, Mom. This is my 18-year-old, who I'm not sure he meditates much. And he's like, but he's like, just meditate and take some deep breaths. Second, do get yourself good people who will remind you you're not alone. Third, believe in a grace that'll accompany you your whole life. My mom says the only reason she made it through medical school was God's grace. There's a sense in which there's a grace that surrounds you when you're doing good things, and I hope and pray and you continue to move in it, and that it covers things that you can't get. And third, take good care if you can of yourself. Like find new ways to like eke out time. Now I couldn't take a whole Sabbath, so I have mini Sabbaths. So I actually read vampire, werewolf, supernatural love novels. That like rejuvenates me in really weird ways. I don't know, because it's like, I don't know. So you have these like little pleasures that you do for yourself. And let me say this, as a Black woman, I ask the world around me to respect when I set my boundaries. This world is very used to asking people who are oppressed or marginalized to bend and wield at their whim. One of the best things I've learned ever is the divine no. What it is to say, no, I cannot. No, I am not able. No, this is not the time, or just no. And do you realize how many people have a hard time when a woman or a Black woman or a brown Black woman says no? They're like, what? You said no? I said, no, I said no. And do you know how long it takes me to come up with the no? I stutter on a one-syllable word. I am so taught to say yes to everything all the time that I've had to work years to master how to say no. And I still stumble on it. Like, I think that I have to accept every invitation or someone asks me to do this. That I haven't been taught well to use my no. Interesting enough, it was the second, third word of most of my children. And somewhere along the line, I know it was a word I used often, no. And I somehow lost it living in this body somewhere along the line. I lost that ability to say no and to have people respect it. So I'm going to say those things are what I would say. Grace abounds. Get yourself a good love circle. Learn to say no. And just let that remind you you're not as alone as you may feel sometimes.
Thank you. So we're getting close to 1:30. I want to finish with two different questions. So let me ask this first one, which actually follows a little bit from what you just talked about. So you know, a lot of Utah State graduates and even students, they begin their families here. They have children here, right? And so they are trying to do all this while they've got, and increasingly, I think we're seeing more and more fathers take an active role in parenting, right? So it's not just mothers, even though that they probably bear a disproportionate load most of the time. But how do parents, especially young parents, balance all of this, right? I mean, to follow the call to do important work, to do what they feel like they have to do in the world when they got people tugging at them and pooping on them and doing everything else. How do you manage that, especially with young kids? I think so many of our students wrestle with that, and they will as young professionals too.
I'm going to say this, going through school with young kids and doing this. First of all, my husband and I took turns. I would take time off, he'd go to school. And so one of us was always in school at a certain amount of times. But during that time as a young parent, I was put on antidepressants because it was so hard. I wasn't sleeping, I was nursing, there was a toddler. I'm going to be very honest. My whole goal was just to survive. And I just want to say this, there's no such thing as balance. We had Renita Weems, a beautiful Black woman theologian and womanist scholar, Old Testament scholar, said, what are you talking about balance? Women, there's no balance. We just find the right rhythm for that time. Some things are going to outweigh each other. There's not like a sense where it's going to be like this. Some things will have to give as we're rearing those early years. So much stuff gave way. Why I helped my kids survive, because they seemed like they were constantly in pursuit of hurting or harming themselves. I have no idea how this was possible, but my whole role was to keep them alive. That's it. Alive and halfway clean. And that didn't always work. I also said I got my children out the house with their underwear clean and their teeth brushed. I had done everything I could. I'd done more before 8:30 than most people in the Marines, anybody had done all day long. And you got to just take it and say, a lot of things this ain't a normal life. When I'm dealing with young babies, so a lot of things are going to have to wait on. So I call it holy suspension. That we're going to do the best we can. What needs to be done, we're just straight up in survival priority mode. And then some things that we want to do is when they get a little older and give us more leeway, we can do those. But right now, it's just you're just working the top priority. What is the fire burning the most right now? Oh, you haven't eaten in so many hours, and I'll get a homework assignment done. I'm gonna tell this story really quick before we end. I remember going through div school and my husband had torn both of his knees and my son had an earache and I kept ignoring it because I had to finish my final papers. We go to the doctor, they say his eardrum burst. And she goes, how long has he been talking about this pain? And I'm like, and I said, I'm sorry, Xavier. And he's like, it's okay, Mom. My ear will feel better in a little bit. I'm like, I was trying to do too much. And then around 3 a.m. that morning, I was giving him his medicine and the dog vomited in my flip-flop. And I lost it. I was like, this is the worst. No one can survive this. We're all just gonna burn the whole house. Everybody eardrums broken, knees cracked, and the dog throws up in my favorite flip-flop. And then I calmed down a little, but I'm saying it's okay to think it's too much, because it is. Do the burning fire, what needs to be done right then, and realize that you'll have time later to do I believe in grace. It'll cover all that you can't do. And just know you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job.
That's great. I want to ask one last question. This comes to us from your old professor, Norm Jones.
Oh.
All right. So he's asking you for some help and some advice. All right. So he says, when you taught USU 1340, we used to talk about how USU could do more to prepare students to live in a diverse world. All right. So based on your experience, all that you've learned along the way, what can we do here at USU? What can we do better to prepare our students, whoever they are, white, black, brown, whoever, Mormon, not Mormon, whatever their background is, right? American, international. How can we prepare USU students to live in the diverse world that it is?
Faculty, leadership and administration. Your leadership, not just minority, but your leadership of that school should also be diverse. And diverse is talking about numbers, but I'm also like the sense of belonging that you create. Also having courses, and you may already have them, Norm. By the way, Norm, I love you. That I also want to think about courses that actually kind of push students to think about these issues, and so faculty, leadership of that administration, needs to represent that, and that the fact that you think about policy and how you move and how you can get your students to really start thinking and analyzing, what is my part in justice? How do I begin knowing what my role? So when questions come up like, what do I do, blah, 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 these questions are also wrestled with in the classroom. That you have, and almost all your classes should be wrestling somewhere along the line in the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Science. This is the wrestle of humanity, is how do we do the work of justice? And it should undergird every course. Somewhere along the line, I don't know how we escape doing social justice work, but it should be interlaced in our curriculum and in our syllabi, how we move with one another, and what the questions we allow students to raise, and how we begin wrestling with the answers.
Thank you, Dr. Salleh. Thank you.
And we ended on time, Dr. Mason.
We ended on, this is amazing. Like, I never end my classes on time. So you can ask my students. So Andrea, we'll let you take it over from here.
Well, I just want to say I certainly could continue to listen to Dr. Salleh for the rest of my Friday afternoon, but I do appreciate that we do want to try to lead with grace and move into our weekend. And what a high note to end on. You know, I've talked to you a little bit about this, Fatimah, when we had a phone call to set this up, that it just, you know, it's a really difficult time right now for a lot of us for different reasons. There's so much that is currently going on in the world. There's so much that has always gone in the world, but it's, you know, it feels really heavy right now. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you sharing your experiences with us and giving us that sense of grace and you know, a sense of humor too, to really deal with difficult issues and to ask, as you say, the hard questions, which we do need to ask. And I'm proud to work for a college that I do think does prepare students to ask those questions. So thank you for those reminders, and thank you for your wisdom. We really appreciate you sharing your time with us today during this hour. And I appreciate Dr. Patrick Mason for taking the time to help lead us through those questions at the end. And thank you, audience. Thank you for coming and being a part of today's discussion. Whether you were part of this discussion live or whether you're coming back to watch this at a later time, hopefully you have taken this wisdom to heart and you will join us for additional conversations like these in the future. So please come back and visit us. We'll be holding conversations throughout the semester with our wonderful alumni. And thank you again, Reverend Dr. Fatimah Salleh, for being a high note in our programming this season. We so appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, I wish everyone a wonderful Friday afternoon. And I can see, you know, coming in the comments here, Fatimah, you've got a lot of fans out there, those here in Logan and former faculty. And I do hope that if you and Eric find your way back to visit family in Hiram when we're allowed to travel again, that you will stop by and say hello so that we can meet you in person.
Yes, of course. I just want to say this to all of you within the sound of my voice. May you be enriched. May you find healing and goodness in this time and eke it out in all the ways possible. And may you continue doing the good work that you've embarked on. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And what beautiful words. So we will end on that. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.